Welcome to Connecting Communities. I'm your host, Nany Bacci. With me today, each year we do this around the same time, is Lieutenant Jim Keenan from the Somerville Fire Department. Thank you for coming on, Jim.
Always my pleasure, Nancy.
As you know, for the past several years, you've very generously and graciously agreed to be my guest as we talk about Fire Prevention Week each year. This year it is coming up October 6th through 12th. Has a catchy tagline each year, which I am going to read. Not every hero wears a cape. Plan and practice your escape. Important information that people need to have. Absolutely.
That's one of the things that we teach in the SAFE program. We call it EDITH, Escape Drills in the Home. And we teach the kids to go home and talk to their parents, draw a picture of their house, and plan 2 ways out of each room. Make sure you have a meeting place outside, call 911, don't go back inside.
There's a lot of information available about Fire Prevention Week, and it's really interesting to kind of go on the website and look and see the different resources available. In just a moment, we're going to see a graphic that talks about what you were just describing, the importance of planning a route, becoming familiar with locations, and really understanding the importance of knowing your way out, and then, as we always emphasize, never going back in. So let's take a look at the graphic. So this is how to make a home fire escape plan, which really has some great information, and I did take a few notes on that, so I was hoping to just get some feedback from you about that. So draw a map of your home, showing all doors and windows. Why do we think it's important to indicate all the doors and windows?
Well, we want you to know 2 ways out of every room, in case the fire is blocking one of them.
Visit each room, find the 2 ways out, and ensure that all windows and doors open easily. I think sometimes that's something particularly based on the weather that maybe we're not as vigilant about checking. I know myself, you know, during the winter or the cooler months, you're not necessarily thinking of opening your windows as much, and sometimes there's a little bit of warping based on the weather, you know, expanding and contracting. So I think making sure that everything opens smoothly is really critical.
Yeah, and also a lot of times people will paint over them. So, you know, you might want to score it with a razor to make sure.
Yeah, I've had that happen myself in the spirit of freshening up, and then you're like, can't get fresh enough. Make sure that your home has smoke alarms. We've talked about this, and I know at the end we'll provide a little bit more information, as we always do, about the importance of that, but working smoke alarms I think is really critical to emphasize.
We always tell people, you know, when we go in the schools, the kids, we talk about, they have some great questions, and a lot of them we call it like the nuclear option, where like the whole house is on fire. So what we tell kids and adults is your best protection is having working and up-to-date smoke detectors and combination carbon monoxide detectors. You have to have those ones on every floor, and you want smoke detectors in each bedroom. And you want to make sure they work. You test them.
Right.
Smoke detectors have to be 10 years older or less than 10 years, and the combos 7 years or less.
Right. I think we talked too, and it's important to really reiterate to people, testing them, you have to almost set an alarm for it, because otherwise it's one of those things where you're like, I'll remember to do it. As I've told you before, I do it with the time change. So you're testing them, it's just an alarm, and then you know to just check it to make sure it's happening, because you don't want in an emergent situation to realize what could have been.
Yep, that's another thing that we've talked about many, many times over the years. Change your clock, change your batteries. I believe it's November 3rd this year. And as you said, test them once a month. You know, test them on the 1st of the month. You know, they have to be working. If they're not working, they could be sitting there, and if the batteries are dead, you know, we talk about how they chirp, and when the batteries are low, and they may chirp for a week, and then they stop, and you forget.
Well, that's the thing too, is, you know, we often see people removing batteries because of the annoyance and not having the replacement ones on hand. And I think it's so important to realize, you know, stock up. When I buy them, I buy like the 20-pack of them, knowing that they're going to be changed out for other things, because you also don't want your batteries to expire. But realizing it's important to just make certain that it's fresh batteries. What could potentially happen is so outweighed by the annoyance of hearing the noise.
Oh, absolutely. And you're really correct about, you want them to be fresh, new, right out of the package. I mean, everybody's got a drawer in their kitchen with a bunch of batteries. Could have been the ones you took out 6 months ago. So you want them right out of the package.
That does seem to be one thing that people are always willing to kind of give a second chance. They're like, well, it didn't work in the remote. Maybe it'll work in a different remote instead of, you know, replenishing them. But I do think, as you said, tie it into something else that you do on a regular basis. You're paying your rent, you're, giving your dog his heartworm pills, something that happens on a recurring basis, so that checking the fire alarm just becomes part of that. And I think it's important too, when you have family members that are living on site with you, to make them part of the process as well, because it seems like a great educational opportunity for young children to realize they're hearing messaging in school, reinforced at home, but the level of investment, I think, is different when you're part of the process.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons we go into the schools, to educate them. But I think when you have a stake in it, it means more to you, and it gives them a sense of power or hey, I'm smart and
right.
I'm big.
You have a
I'm
responsibility.
Yeah,
like it's
you're part of the solution.
Right, exactly. You operate as a family, so as a family, this is something that you do to keep each other and your home safe.
And the reason we tell you to practice it twice a year is so that it's not like, what do I do when that smoke detector goes off in this smoke?
Right.
They're used to it. I think we've talked about this many times. You used to do it with your kids. Now, you don't have to do it at 2 in the morning.
Right.
It gets dark.
Don't need
it gets
totally
dark
traumatized.
early. So you can do it at like 8 o'clock,
Right.
now because it's dark, and pretend it's, the middle of the night with your children. But this way, when it does happen for real, everybody has an idea of what to do. Like you said, and basically it's get out and go to that meeting place and call us, 911.
Right. I mean, this is the importance too. I do want to revisit the drills in a moment, but picking a meeting place outside the home. So a distance away where you're able to keep yourself safe. Everybody knows where to go, centrally located. Even if it's as simple as across the street at a neighbor's house, you're still removed from the situation. And then the importance, obviously, of calling 911 and never going back into the house, which is something I hope you will help emphasize.
Oh, we stress that all the time. And Nancy, going to the meeting place is part of the escape drill. So it's not like a separate thing. It's probably about the last part of it, and calling us, getting out for, planning it, practicing it, and then when you get out, go to your meeting place and call us. So it is part of the drill, and it's important because it gives us when we show up, you can say, okay, everybody's out. We don't have to worry so much about finding a missing person. We can go right to fighting the fire.
Right.
Now, if somebody's missing, that's our first priority.
Well, I think too, like you're saying, like the reason you practice the drills at different times, and your house looks very different in the dark. It doesn't matter, I feel, how long you've lived there, how you can say I could walk through blindfolded. Well, you can walk through blindfolded in a very calm situation. I can navigate my house at 2 a.m. perfectly fine. But if you add other components like your smoke detectors going off, there is smoke, or God forbid there's fire, that changes all your level of comfort. I assume that goes right out the window. So I think it is important to realize what your house looks like during the day, and as we've talked before, identifying tripping hazards, things that may inadvertently be blocking your doorway, and then realizing the easiest way to navigate a safe passage.
Yeah, good housekeeping is a very important part of it. Like you said, keeping the walkways and the doorways clear of obstructions. A lot of people, they'll bring their bike in, or a suitcase that just came home from the airport, and it's important to keep those areas open and accessible. And again, when you practice these things, when you sit down and draw that grid of your own home, and you've got your family, your kids, or whoever's there that you live with, when it does happen, yes, you're going to be excited, scared, but you will also, that part of that practice will kick in and give you a little bit of, calmness. I know what to do.
Right. It's like muscle memory.
Exactly.
You're going to realize, your emotions are heightened, but it also, I think it's important to know too, like everybody has a role. You know what I mean? So you come together, you have an exit plan to just realize the level of investment it takes as the members of your household to ensure that everyone's safe. And
it's funny, especially when we talk to kids, they like being in charge. They like telling their parents, hey, this is what we're supposed to be doing.
It's good. They're practicing to be adults. Some other information they had indicated on the website that was important, I thought, as well. Making sure your house or building number can be seen from the street.
Yeah, it's actually a law, believe it or not. But that's to aid us in getting to the right address.
Right. I mean, because sometimes, people think of fire response and you're thinking of a fire, but as we know, the fire department responds to a multitude of calls, including medical calls, where there may not be the obvious indicator of the address. So
Yeah.
making certain that that's really important.
Be surprised how many homes don't have their number on it. I have friends in California, and they paint it on the curb. I'm like, well, that would never work here because of snow.
No, I didn't even think of that. Yeah, it's a factor. Talking to children, and this is something I know you had indicated in the SAFE program, and I do want to give you the opportunity to talk a little bit more about that. But the website information indicates talking to children about ways to escape on their own if they are not able, if you are physically separated for some reason in the house. So when you go into the schools, and I want you to tell the audience a little bit more about the SAFE program, is that a question I wonder that ever comes up from kids about getting out of a house? So first, a little bit about the SAFE program, and then maybe the interactions with the young people.
Yeah, the SAFE program was started by the Department of Fire Services, I think like 20 years ago, because what they noticed is that in home fires, children were dying disproportionately because they didn't know what to do.
Right.
You know, they always talk about hiding under the bed or in a closet. So it's a proven program. It works. You know, children's fire deaths have dropped dramatically in all those years. We go from pre-K to third grade, try to reach as many kids. And it's not just the public schools, it's every school in Somerville that we go to. And we give them the basics, you know, fire prevention. We always tell them it's easier to prevent a fire than to put it out. You know, don't play with matches and lighters. And we also talk about other things that can burn you, like hot water, like if you're boiling water for pasta. You know, we tell kids don't play with a ball or run around the kitchen. Or if they're going to take a bath, always have an adult check the water first, because other things can burn you.
Right.
And, you know, and then we tell them what to do if there is a fire in their home. And like I said, maybe the parent did run out to the car or is down the cellar, I don't know. So when that smoke detector goes off and you see smoke or fire, you know, we tell them, get out, go to your meeting place. If the smoke is, you know, advancing down from the ceiling, crawl low under the smoke. And we have kids actually do it. You know, we get them, you know, I used to use a sheet and put it in front of their face and say, all right, that's the smoke. Can you crawl under it? And they would crawl on the, you know, on all fours. And then I'd put it back in their face. I'm like, can you get lower? And, you know, so they'd crawl on their bellies. You know, and if it's not down in your face, you can walk out the door.
Right.
But if it is, get them down low, get outside, go to the meeting place, don't go back in, call 911.
So what kind of response does this program get in the schools? Because I know you said before, like, the opportunity arises to come in the gear so that young children are able to see firefighters as they actually would see them when they're responding to an emergency. That's another part of the program. We want kids, especially the younger ones, not everybody's seen a firefighter in their uniform, their turnout gear with a mask on. And it could be scary. You know, I try to make a joke out of it. I always make the Darth Vader voice, you know, Luke, I am your father. But we do it so that they won't be afraid of us and run away or hide under that bed. You know, if there's a fire or an emergency going on in your house and you see us, we want you to come to us or call to us. Right. So that's another reason to go in and show these kids, you know, we're on your side. I think that's important to note because a lot of the experience young children have with firefighters is they're going by the station and maybe they stop in and get to look at the fire trucks or talk to you guys or field trip options, things like that where they're learning about public safety. And the interactions initially with the school is they're seeing you like this. So you're Lieutenant Keenan. You're not necessarily, as you said, in turnout gear where there's a lot of other things happening, a lot of other factors, and now you don't look like the person that they're used to approaching. Yeah, right. And surprisingly, or not, kids always have stories for us, whether it happened to them, a family member, or a friend that's had some kind of emergency. Really? You know, not necessarily the house on fire, but, you know, medical emergency, or they got burned, like you said, by, you know, soup or something spilled on them. But a lot of anecdotes from kids. So it's out there. And that's the reason we do it, to help them. And really, prevention is the biggest reason. You know, like I said, it's much easier to prevent fires and injuries than to, you know, put them out or treat them after it's happened. I imagine going into the classrooms, the young people must be excited, though, especially that age as you're indicating, like up to third grade. They're still like so excited to learn about all the things in the world. So I think it must be very rewarding to have those conversations with them, but also to see their excitement about public safety. And like you said, their eagerness to share stories, I'm sure, is right through the roof. It is. It's very rewarding. And they teach us stuff, too. I
I may have mentioned this in the past to you. You know, we try to get them to hold their questions to the end. But it seems like there's always that one question I've never heard before.
Yeah.
And one that comes to mind that was maybe like the Hall of Fame for me. This kid asked me, he goes, what if I'm in the car and the car catches on fire? And I was like, oh my God, it's a great question. Right?
It's not what
and
you think of
I
when you
never
think
thought
of
of
something
it.
being on fire. You think of a building.
Exactly. And I said, you know what? It's the same thing. Get out of the car. You know, if you have to crawl low, you know, if part of the SAFE program is stop, drop, and roll, and you tell them if your clothing is on fire, stop, drop, and roll. But I couldn't. I was like, that is probably the best question I've ever gotten. But I've had many. Yeah. But that's the one that stands out the most. Like these kids, they're bright. Yeah. Kids are bright, and they enjoy being involved too.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think again, it's talking about like accountability and responsibility. Like you're talking to them about an issue, and if they're part of the solution to that, it's a different level, I think, of interest that they feel about it.
And you know, when we encounter myself, but most of the guys and women that I work with, when we encounter kids out, like you said, coming by the firehouse, or we do community events, I'll quiz them. You know, they don't know it, but I'll say, hey, you know, did the firefighter come to your school? What did you learn? What do you remember? And it's good because of that repetition going back. And we actually even tested third graders on it. They get it. You know, they might not get it all, but the repetition, they get it every time. They get more and more. And by the time they're in that third grade, they pretty much have it. And like you said, knowledge is power. The seconds count in an emergency. It's a great program, and I'm fully invested in it. And the kids like it too. It's great for everybody.
Yeah, I mean, it's a nice opportunity. And when you're thinking of other ways for a community to connect with the fire department, I was thinking back to National Night Out in August. So the fire department sends over the truck and, you know, number of firefighters, and talking with young people, older people, even talking to some young adults about like an interest in working at the fire department. But to see the young people, like one little boy had on the coat and then he had the hose, and it was just, you know, it's just that thing though, making it part of every day. You know, talking about these things just becomes part of the standard of conversation. It shouldn't be something that's like looming as this giant threat. You know what I mean? Just having knowledge, as you said, is power. So understanding how to act in an emergency situation isn't intended to be scary. It's intended to be empowering to a person.
Yeah, I've heard in, you know, seminars that I've attended said more than once that often when we show up to someone's home, it's like the worst day of their lives. So we're trying to make it not so bad. If you know what to expect when we show up, it'll help, I think, a little.
Yeah, it's interesting to just watch some young people sometimes, and just that pure admiration. And we see it with the police department as well, where they're just like, maybe this is what I want to be. You know, it's nice to think back over, I mean, your almost 35-year career, right? And realize, without you even knowing, the people that you could have inspired to pursue this as a career option.
I hope so. Yeah, you know, I got into this business because I wanted to help people. And it's very rewarding. I really enjoy it. It's a great career, and I would tell anybody to look into it.
Yeah, it's, you know, definitely something that the commitment to the community is so important. You know, and I appreciate every year, like you said, you coming on, sharing this information. So I do want to transition a little bit into some more general fire safety things. We talked about replacing your smoke detectors, where to put them, how many you should have. One thing that we always talk about with the fall and winter coming is the idea of the portable heating units, and then as well as venting issues. So can you talk a little bit about space heaters?
Yeah, the first thing I would say is, if you don't need them, don't use them. Also, that years and years ago, they had those kerosene ones. They're completely illegal and extremely dangerous. So if you do use them, make sure they're a good brand. You know, check the tag so that it has the tag from UL Underwriters Laboratory or Factory Mutual. They do the testing. You know, you don't want to get one at a flea market. You want to, and if you've had it for a while, check the cord, make sure it's not cracked or anything. If it is, you want to get rid of it. So when you do use it, we tell you want to keep it 3 feet away from anything that can burn. The drapes, the couch, the table, your person. And shut it off at night when you go to bed. You know, unplug it. Again, with the winter heating season coming, you want to have your boiler heating element checked by a professional licensed person, to clean it, to make sure it's in proper working order. These are the things we do for ourselves, each and every one of us, to protect ourselves.
Right. Well, we think of that too, the cooler weather. Fireplaces are in use, just other things that, sometimes they're just part of your home, so you don't necessarily think of them as maintenance in the way you would think of it, like with your car or something that would present as a problem. Because, speaking for myself, a lot of things I feel like just kind of circle over here and then it becomes a problem and then you address it. So it's not necessarily preventive maintenance, but thinking of that, more and more homes seem to be utilizing fireplaces just as an ambiance option, I think, perhaps, but definitely, again, something that you have to make certain is in perfect working order.
Yeah, make sure the flue's open and cleaned. Most of them, you can get the screen, or some of them have those glass doors, always have it. Don't leave it unattended. If you have to leave the room, call your, housemaid or child, or not young child, but, we have children that are not in their 20s. So, but make sure someone's there.
Right.
And again, keep stuff 3 feet away from that too. It's like if you think you're in a ski chalet and you're on a blanket on the floor, well, make sure you're 3 feet away from it.
Yeah. Well, we think of that too. Just more so sometimes the holidays, think of like increased candle use and just all of these things, which I think speaks to the preventive nature you had referenced, which is, using proper care and using an item and disposing of an item and just all of those things, because it's so much easier to not have a situation happen than have to be put in the position of the department having to respond to your emergency.
Well, since you mentioned candles, one of the things we always tell people, of course, never leave them alone. If you're going to go out to the bathroom or the kitchen, blow it out and then relight it.
Right.
But you want those, doesn't have to be those $1 million Yankee candles, but you want them in those glass containers, or if it's a regular, just a freestanding candle, you want it on a thick glass or ceramic candle holder, something legitimate. And that's another thing. You want to keep the candle a foot away from anything that can burn, such as the drapes. I think I told you once, when I was a younger firefighter, we had a fire alarm on Highland Ave, an apartment building, and the guys went in, I was driving the pump, and I just happened to look up, and I see a candle in the window, and I saw the drape blowing across, and I called on the radio, go up to the 3rd floor, there it is.
Right.
You have to keep vigilant, but keep it a foot away from anything that can burn. Never leave them unattended, especially with kids around. And use those good sturdy ones.
And then the other thing, even though we don't want to use the S word yet, with snow coming down, it does sometimes tend to block your vents, or people we've mentioned before, also shoveling out cars. So just the cautions around that.
So the vent that you're talking about, with all the newer construction and remodeling that's going on in Somerville and everywhere, they have these direct vent boilers. Okay, so you might see them, it's that little piece of white PVC, but it's only 2 or 3 feet off the ground coming out of the side of the house, not like at the old days, the chimney. So those things can get blocked. That is actually, we've talked about this before, where the carbon monoxide detector law came from, because a family suffocated, they had shoveled the snow in front of that direct vent. So you got to keep that clear of snow. Same thing like the car, as you said. A lot of us will start our car up so it'll be warm while we're digging it out and, getting the snow off the windshield. But if you block that tailpipe, it's going to fill the car up with the exhaust. And you might smell it, you might not, especially with these newer cars, because they run cleaner.
Yes.
But it's still carbon monoxide. And if you get in your car and it's full of carbon monoxide and you start driving away without realizing it, it's going to, knock you out and harm you.
I think of that sometimes too, like if adults are transporting children, because, you want the car to be warmed up. So you put the child in, warm the car up while you're shoveling, and then potentially you have a person or a young person who doesn't have the ability to tell you what's happening.
Yeah, and it affects them quicker, less of the carbon monoxide to affect them than us.
Right, it is. Yeah, there are lots of challenges, but I think, again, having you come on each year, share the information, and again, the anecdotes, I think, make it very relatable to people, but it is just such important information for people to have. And when we had the escape plan map up, it had indicated the sparky.org website, and just there's lots of ways to really gather information for adults, for caregivers, for very young children, and then ages going right up, because it's relatable in a way that I think is really important, so people aren't discounting the information. It really feels practical to your everyday life.
Yeah, every year we tell them, we tell them to go on to the mass.gov /DFS, Department of Fire Services. There is everything you want to know. We get our information from them. And it's easy to access, it's easy to read. They have stuff you can print out, and there's films and stuff like that. There's also the NFPA website. I find DFS a little easy to use because the NFPA is more about the laws and regulations.
It's technical. I've looked at that.
Yeah, it's more technical.
It's
That's
just
the
a
right
different
word.
read, yeah.
One of the other things, Nancy, we've always talked about in the past is the senior safe that we talk about. And that is not just fire prevention, but it's also fall prevention. Because the older we get, if you fall, you're very likely to get hurt and seriously hurt. So a lot of it's the same thing. We talk about prevention. Unfortunately, some of our seniors still smoke. It's bad for you. But we tell them if you're going to do it, get a big, big, deep ashtray. Make sure it's out. Douse it in some water before you throw it away. And it's the same thing. They need an escape drill too. And they need to stay out and call 911. Now, if they're infirm, maybe they're in a wheelchair or something, some of the protection we can tell them is to keep the door closed. We talk about stop, drop, and roll with the kids. Well, if you're a senior and you can't do it, get a heavy blanket and smother it.
Right.
But always call us. And same thing what you talked about earlier, keeping the walkways clear. And we always tell them, keep a flashlight next to the bed if you have to get up in the middle of the night. Or maybe they're very cheap, those night lights. You can put them all over the place.
Yeah, it definitely is. It makes a difference having this information. I want to thank you again for coming on. We are just going to see one more image, which we had talked about a little bit earlier, about what drew you to the job. The city's personnel department has been working with the Somerville Fire Department to create an open house to encourage people to come in and learn more about career in firefighting. So I think you had indicated what a great job you had with it and how much you loved it. So we are encouraging people to come on November 16th down to the main firehouse headquarters and learn more about a career in firefighting. So hopefully we'll get a great turnout for that. Thank you again for coming on.
Always my pleasure.
Year.
Thank you.
I'd like to thank the production crew, Joe Constantine and Lenny Scaletta. Thank you for watching.